If you've ever struggled to see within Escape from Tarkov's PVE mode and you're wondering how the hell do I see on a night raid, well, this video is for you. This is going to make it absolutely easy to see everything within your raid, to the point where it almost feels like it's a daytime raid. You can see everything perfectly, it's just a little bit of the darker colours everywhere and it doesn't work quite as effective as daytime, but you get all of the advantages of running on a nighttime raid with boss aggro being smaller, and of course all of the AI's aggro range being smaller because it's nighttime and they have a smaller range at which they'll spot you to make it a little bit fairer. And so with that being said, let's jump into the video. But whilst we're jumping into the settings, if you want to support me, make sure to hit that like button. It is the biggest thing that you can do to help me out, and I really do appreciate the support. So let's jump in. There are two main things that we need to discuss when it comes to improving your vision within the game, and the first thing that we're going to look at is, of course, your settings within Tarkov itself, and then we'll delve into probably one of the more important parts for this video in the second part, but they're still both important. And so let's take a look at the settings that we've got set up. First things first is shadow quality. This is something that is in your graphic setting within the game, and essentially you can turn it low, medium. These are the two that I usually use. Now I can absolutely run ultra, but you just end up with more shadows and the shadows being larger or more distracting, and so having them on low or medium is kind of the optimal settings for actual visibility within the game, but of course choose whatever you want. It's just down to you and whether you want max visibility or just whether you want it to look good. So then we move on to some of the other things. Make sure that your FPS limit is as high as you can possibly go, just so that it's smoother. And then we go into the post effects settings. This essentially gives you the option to tick on post effects, and the main ones that we're looking at today are the brightness and the colorfulness within the game. Brightness, obviously, as it stands for, is literally how bright the game actually looks within your game, so making that as high as possible just makes everything pop a little bit more, and so useful. It isn't the biggest impact within the game, and having this on -100 versus 100 really doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but it definitely does make a difference, so having that on max is useful. And then we've got colorfulness. Colorfulness is essentially how vibrant the actual colors are in the game, which for a night raid everything is kind of grayscale because of the fact it's light or dark, and so having this on the maximum gives you a better contrast between all of the colors that are actually in the game, and can actually mean that you'll see things like grass in a much better way and be able to kind of pinpoint different locations that have different colors. So I think this being on the maximum is very, very useful. So put that on the maximum, or test it out, see what you're comfortable with, and that's kind of what these settings are basically for. Don't just blindly use all of them and think that it's going to be perfect, because you want to make sure that you just adjust them to how you like it, but the overall going from 0 to 100 if nothing else is different on your monitor, etc., is going to be useful, so make sure that you're doing that. And then everything else I don't really touch. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference. You could change the saturation slightly and just test it out. For me, this works perfectly and I don't have any issues seeing at night at all, so just use that. We'll jump into the next bit of this video and go over that now. Now then, if you didn't already know, there is often a NVIDIA control panel which gives you the option to change various different settings within your computer or your monitor, and so this allows you to alter how the actual gameplay or your just general monitor actually looks when you get the vision from it. And so this is essentially what we do when we want to be able to go into night raids and essentially change some of the settings in here. The first setting and how you actually get to this, you can right click on your Windows desktop and be able to go to NVIDIA control settings, or you can search it up, so NVIDIA control panel, and therefore you'll get this kind of pop-up menu. Then all you want to do is come to adjust desktop color settings, and this will give you both of the monitors that you've actually got available to you. You can see we're using two monitors here. One of them has our base settings, which is 50% brightness, 50% contrast, and 1 gamma. And so this is the monitor at which we're playing Tarkov on right now in the night. Now, when it comes to your specific monitor, you have a wide variety of settings that you can use, both on the monitor. Sometimes you can improve the brightness on your actual monitor display itself, which you can do, and this is going to help. But obviously, fine-tuning this to your specific monitor is going to be what you want to do. For mine, these are the values that we're using, and I'm going to tell you why. So the contrast here gives you the difference between the lightest and darkest parts of the desktop. The higher the contrast, the more these will pop. So if something is white versus something is black, or something is grey, for example, and something is, you know, a dark grey, you will see the lighter grey kind of in contrast more to the darker grey. So it can kind of, in a lot of cases, be much worse for visibility in something like a daytime raid, because there's a lot of different colors and they can end up being very different. But when it comes to a night raid, it's usually a bit more grayscale, and so having your contrast up does definitely help, especially in Tarkov. And so putting this up to 65% is what I did for my monitor, but of course test this out with your own one and see where that comfort spot is for you. Then we've got gamma. This is probably the biggest thing. It basically essentially changes how you will see things within the game. The lower the gamma, you'll kind of see darker colors. The higher the gamma, you'll kind of get a general kind of white scale, if that makes sense. So finding a sweet spot between the two is where you want to find. At the moment, I've got it set as about 1.43, which gives us a nice little pop to the screen and makes actually in-game raids on Tarkov much easier to see within. So that's where your gamma can come in. There is no setting within actual Tarkov itself to be able to do this, but this is definitely the best and most impactful way to be able to see at night. It genuinely makes it so easy, to the point where you could pretty much be in a daytime raid and have the same sort of visibility. Obviously, colors are going to be much darker, and so, you know, it's not going to be the exact same as a daytime, but it makes it much easier. And remember, because we're in a nighttime raid versus a daytime raid, depending on what time you go in, if you're after 10 o'clock and before 5 in the morning, I believe, or 4 in the morning, essentially the aggro range of a lot of the AI within the game is decreased, which means you can run around the map a lot more freely. And if you can see just as basically as well as you can see in a daytime raid, it makes it a lot easier, and so you can get through a lot of those tasks that have been kind of annoying. And if you're playing PvP, for example, you just have a straight up advantage. You can see people without having to use night vision, and obviously night vision against lights is much worse. You've got a lot of negatives with night vision, whereas this really doesn't have any of those negatives. And although it does mean that you have to come into your settings on the desktop when you want to go back to a daytime raid and essentially swap it back to the standard, which is 50-51, it really isn't too much effort, and it takes like 20 seconds to have that massive advantage. And if you're going to be running a lot of nighttime raids, I'd highly recommend finding that sweet spot where you can find and optimize kind of how your monitor and everything looks in combination with one another, and then making sure that your Tarkov settings line up with that to make the best experience possible. That is what I do. It's nothing super difficult. It is super simple and will definitely make your raids a ton easier. I wanted to showcase it to you guys. If you found it useful, make sure to like this video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.